Hello, welcome to Thinking Maps Ambassadors. I'm Mrs. Bearden, and I'm going to be guiding you through the wonderful world of thinking maps now. We're going to be getting started by talking about what a thinking map is. So a thinking map is a special kind of graphic organizer that's assigned to one and only one specific thought process. So we're going to be learning 8 different thinking maps in this course, and each map will help us record our thoughts when we're thinking in one specific way. So the first thinking map we're going to work on is called a circle map. And a circle map is a wonderful tool that will help us when we are working to define a word in context. So circle maps are one of my absolute favorite maps because I'm always learning something new and I need to write down my thoughts to help me remember what exactly I was trying to get at. So let's get started. A circle map is something we can use if we are working on new vocabulary in a class or if our teacher has asked us to define something. So we'll start by writing our target word down. And for this first map, our target word we're going to start with is something that we all know something about. So we're going to start with pizza because I'm hoping you all know something about pizza. So we'll start by writing the word pizza in the middle of our space and we'll put a small circle around it. All right, now once we've got that down, we are going to then add some of our understanding about pizza. Now, I happen to know that pizza has lots of different parts. There's dough, right, or crust, and there's different kinds of crust. Sometimes you can get stuffed crust. I really like stuffed crust, but it does add on a lot of cheese. All right, so there's different kinds of dough. There's stuffed crust. You can get New York style, and that's usually a little bit bigger pieces and it's kind of floppy. You can fold it and eat it. I like New York style. Pizza has lots of different toppings. I know that pizza always has cheese on it. Okay. So pizza has cheese, it has toppings. Oh, you can get different kinds of sauce. I know that. I happen to like several different kinds of sauce on mine, so that's always fun. Another thing I know about pizza, I was talking about crust earlier. I really, really like thin crust pizza. That's my absolute favorite. Thin crust. I know you can also get, deep dish. Okay. So kind of just jotted down everything I know that helps me understand pizza. Oh, I know that it's baked. Once I've got down my ideas, and this kind of helps me solidify my understandings, what I know about pizza, now I'm going to put a big circle around all of my ideas, hence, yeah, circle map, right? And remember, circle maps are used for defining in context. But now that I've got my ideas down and I kind of know what pizza is about, I need to kind of give this some context, something that helps my brain connect it to something I already know or another life experience I've had so that my brain will go, oh, this is important information. You should save it so you can use it again later. So I do that with what's called a frame of reference. So once I've got my map and I've drawn my big circle around all my ideas, I'm going to now draw a big frame around that. And it doesn't have to be centered anywhere. So I'm just going to draw my big giant frame. This is called the frame of reference. And this is where I can tell where I got my ideas from or connect it to something that I already know. So I learned a lot about pizza from eating it. I'm just going to put eating. I also learned a bit about pizza from watching cooking shows. So I could put cooking shows because that's somewhere I learned about pizza. And I'm trying to think, where this might help me in my life. If I know about pizza, this might help me be better able to cook for myself. So maybe this would be a life skill. There we go. A life skill that I might like. And knowing about pizza helps me maybe plan healthier meals. So this might help me with health because I can plan to create a pizza that is healthier instead of my favorite pepperoni, right? So it might help me make healthy choices. So that's helping me kind of connect it to something. Now I want to connect this to my own personal experience. So I'm trying to remember one of my favorite experiences eating pizza. I was in New York City with my family, and we went to this big Macy's store. It's like huge. So we get there, and they have this giant pizza court, and we decided to try a New York style pizza, and we get it, and the pieces are almost as wide as my face. It was the most exciting thing ever. I had never seen such a huge slice of pizza. It was so big that just to fit it in our mouth and be able to hold it without it falling out of our hands, we had to fold the slices in half and then eat it almost like a pizza sandwich. It was my favorite pizza experience ever. So I want to just kind of summarize that experience in a word or two. So I'm just going to say pizza in NYC because that's helping me put in context where I learned about pizza. So in my frame of reference, I'm going to put pizza in NYC. That means New York City. So that was where I had a really fun experience with pizza that I want to connect to, so my brain will go, oh yeah, okay, I need to remember these things. So this is our first example. All right. Now we're going to try a couple of more examples just to make sure you guys know what this is, and then I'm going to ask that you pause the recording and create your own, and I'll give you a topic. But let's work now on another topic just to make sure we understand how to create our circle map. So I'm trying to think of fun ideas that you guys all have a background on, and you guys can follow along and make your own as I'm making mine if you want. So I'm thinking, let's talk next about something everybody I think probably has some experience with. And this I think is something we try to avoid in school most of the time. But let's talk about what we know about cell phones. Everybody has some knowledge on this, even if we don't have one right now. Hopefully, some of you might even be joining me right now with one. So let's talk about cell phones. So I start by putting my topic down in the middle, and then I draw a circle around it. Now, as my knowledge develops, and if I'm reading in a book about this particular topic, I might take notes about what I'm reading as I'm going, about what I know about cell phones when I'm done. So I know that cell phones come in different brands. I know there are Apple phones and there are Android phones. Apple and Android. I know phones can be used to do millions of different things. I personally like to play on the apps on my phone. We can use phones for our social media. Ugh, I'm sorry, guys. There we go. Social media. I know I'm really old, but you know, it used to be that we used phones to actually call people. And I know now most of the time we text them or we tweet, there we go. Yeah, like I said, I'm old. We might text or tweet our friends, we might messenger them, we could text, we could call on cell phones. I know that cell phones need a signal to work. Signal. I also know that you got to charge that battery, right? So there's a battery. Battery. Oh yeah, we have to have the right charger. I know there are different kinds of chargers. Okay, so I've got a lot of knowledge about cell phones. When I feel like I've got everything I know, what do I do next? You're right. I'm going to draw a big circle around the whole thing. So I've given some definition to my term. I've explained it a little bit. Now I need to give it some context. I need to bring it home, make it personal. This is where I need to add my frame of reference. So I'm going to now make a big frame around my circle. Does it have to be centered? Nope, it does not. Doesn't need to be centered at all. So, and you'll notice on this map, I don't have the exact same number of items I had on the other map, and they're not arranged in any specific way because this map is just to show my thinking. So it doesn't have to look exactly like anyone else's, and it's gonna look a little bit different every time I make it. That means I'm doing it right. Okay, so now I've kind of given myself my background knowledge, everything I know about cell phones. Now I need to think about, well, where did I get this information from? Well, I got some of this information from using mine. Using my phone. Some of this information I may have gotten from friends and family because I've seen the things they've done. I've seen my friends' iPhones and how awesome they are. So friends and family helped give me some of the ideas. Okay, now I kind of want to connect this to my own life. And I know with cell phones, I want to do some research because I'm trying to figure out which particular cell phone I want to get when I get my next phone. So if that's the case, then just to help me remember why am I doing all this, I might write on here, decide what phone I want. Because maybe I'm using this to kind of help me get ideas about what I want or what I need. There we go. So maybe that's my connection to myself. Maybe that's my personal connection. But I've also used my own phone quite a lot, right? And I'm on it all the time. And I'm trying to find out like which one has the best battery, which one lasts the longest, which one can do all the things I want it to do. So those are all things I'm going to want to know. And I'm trying to think about what another context I might have for my phone. You know, phones are techie things, right? And technology is kind of part of science. So this might, a phone might be something I can use to learn about computing or technology or science. I'm just going to put those ideas in my frame of reference. Phones are technology, right? Technology. Okay. So I've learned about it in that way aspect, and I might be able to connect that to something I've learned in my science class. So I might put science on here if this were, there we go. Bear with me, guys. There we go. So maybe I would put, sorry, it's not picking it up. So maybe I would write science in here, but I would want to spell that right. So let's see, science as, now remember this is a thinking map. It's to display your thinking. You're not graded on spelling on this. I'm just being picky because I know you guys are watching and I don't want to misspell something. But when you're making your own maps, this is for you. This is to display your thinking, so you don't need to worry about it being perfect. Okay? All right. So we talked a little bit about this example. We started with our word in the middle. And then once we had the word in the middle, we kind of gave all the information we know about it. And after we do that, what do we draw around the information? A giant circle. Yeah, that's right. Because what kind of map is this? A circle map, that's right. Okay, so once I've got all of my information and I've circled it with my giant circle, I need to add that's right, my frame of reference. Excellent. So what do I put in a frame of reference? Yeah, I put where I learned about it from. I put personal experiences in there, something that's going to hook my memory and help me remember this. Sometimes I might even connect this to a class I'm taking, or I might say, oh man, I learned this word by watching TV. So maybe I'll write that down. So this is where I make those connections that are going to help my brain say, oh, this is important information. Let's put this in long-term storage. All right. So we've practiced a couple of times now. I'd like you guys to work with me. We are going to now work on one together. All right, so on your papers, you guys are going to do the same thing I'm doing. So you're going to create your map, and we are going to start with something really simple. I know many of you are taking a science class this semester, and one of the first assignments in your science class asks you to define science. What do we know about science? All right, so what I'd like you to do is take just a few moments, and I want you to give me some information you might have about science. What do you already know about what is science? All right, so we're going to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to ask that you write down a few things you know about science. Ready, get set, and let's work. Okay, so now, okay, Chloe, you're not helping me right now. Okay, where did I'm still the only one anyway. Okay. Are we still recording? Probably. Let's see. Pause. All right. So you should have had a few minutes now to go over what we were just talking about. And let's now look at our maps. Those of us here were working together and we created something. And we were talking about science too. So we came up with some ideas for what we like. Oh, it's pause screen sharing. Hang on, guys. I'm sorry. There, let's try that. There we go. Okay, sorry for those of you who weren't able to see for a moment. So those of us here kind of thought about science, and we came up with what we know about science. It's kind of when we ask those why questions. It's something we study. It talks about how things work. Science is part of everything. We have to observe in science. We talked about chemistry, biology. Science is part of music. We have to write in science. We have to do math in science. There's also physics is a kind of science. So once we've got everything we want to talk about for science, all that we know, what do we put around it? Yeah, we're going to put a giant circle, right? Okay, and that you guys might have a much bigger map. You might have a lot more knowledge than we put here in this quick exercise. That's awesome. Maybe some of you thought to pull out your science book and look up to see if they had a definition in there, or Google it to see if there was a definition. That would be an excellent thing to add to this. So now that we've got our ideas, we need to add our frame of reference. Okay, so we're going to add our big old frame of reference, and hopefully you guys remember to do this on your own. So I know that some of this information I got from my textbook, right? So I'm going to put on here textbook because that's where I got some of this information, and that helped me. Okay. Some of this information I got just from being around, right? So I might say, like, I've used science, so I know that I had to do math in my science class because I had to calculate different things. Like I might be trying to find miles per hour. That's math. That's also science, right? So I've used science in my life. So I'm going to put personal experience. But maybe instead of just putting personal experience, I want to put an example. So an example of a time I used science in my life Oh, there are so many of them, but I was trying to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie, and it kept coming out too puffy. And I'm a big cookie fan. I wanted my cookies soft and chewy, but I didn't want them like super fluffy. I wanted them kind of flatter. So I had to keep experimenting with my recipe and changing the proportion of ingredients until I got my cookies to taste, look, and feel the way I wanted. That's an example of science in my life. So I'm going to put on here perfect cookie, because that's an example of when I use science in my life. And maybe my teacher asked me, perfect, there we go. Maybe my teacher asked me to answer a critical thinking question. I could answer that in my frame of reference as well if my teacher wanted me to. So maybe she wanted me to, or he wanted me to explain how science is connected to other disciplines. So in my frame of reference, I could answer that question by saying, and I can speak right off my map, science is part of everything. When we do science, we're trying to answer questions. We're talking about looking for how ways things work. We have to observe. We have to write about what we found. Sometimes we have to do math to understand what we're looking at. So I could write that in my frame of reference. It could be a couple of sentences. Maybe your teacher wants a whole paragraph. That can go right in your frame of reference. And that is going to help me, when I look at this map later, remember, oh yeah, that's what that was. And it makes it so your brain goes, yeah, this is important. Stick with it. Let's keep it. Like, pin that on the whiteboard. Let's keep that. All right. So we've had a chance to practice a couple of our thinking maps. Now we're going to kind of switch gears. We're still working with circle maps, but I would like to examine with you our school-wide expected learning outcomes. Does anyone know what our school-wide expected learning outcomes are? This is an acronym. It has 4 letters. Anybody got it? Anybody remember? I know Ms. Thomas students have worked with her a lot on this, but the rest of us may not have as much experience. So let's see if anybody recognizes our school-wide expected learning outcomes. And I was wrong, there are 5, sorry guys. Okay, so does anybody recognize GRADS? Many of us have seen it. I hope all of us get to see it this year. We are going to talk about, what does GRADS mean? What is GRADS? Well, GRADS is something we all want to learn to incorporate as just part of us. So the first thing is G. Anybody know what G stands for? Okay, those of you who said growth-minded were right. We want to have a growth mindset. So we want to be growth-minded. Yeah. Okay. Growth-minded. Good. Okay. What might R stand for? Yeah, some of us know this one. R means resourceful. Good. All right. And what does A stand for? I think we all have been this at one point in the last week or so, but A means actively engaged. Actively engaged. Good. Okay. So actively engaged. D stands for determined. That's one we hear a lot at school, right? Because school takes a lot of determination. You gotta really stick with it. And you guys are showing that right now because you're here and you're working. All right. And the last one is socially responsible. So we're going to take a look at each of these terms. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a circle map with you for one of the terms. And then your homework is going to be twofold. You have 2 homework assignments from me this week. The first homework assignment from me is to choose one of our school-wide learning outcomes and complete a circle map that talks about that school-wide learning outcome. Okay, so we've got growth-minded, resourceful, actively engaged, determined, and socially responsible. I am going to choose resourceful. So let me clear our board here, and we're going to do a map on resourceful. Okay, so what does it mean to be resourceful? All right, so I've wrote my word and I'm circling it, and now I'm going to put what I know about it. Okay, so resourceful means, let's see, resourceful means looking for solutions, right? So looking for solutions. Awesome. Okay, so that's one part of being resourceful. Resourceful could also mean using more than one resource. So looking for more than one. So getting help from more than one place. So when I'm doing my schoolwork, maybe that would mean not just looking in my textbook, not seeing it and going, oh, I don't know, I'll wait and ask at my meeting next week. Maybe that would mean texting my teacher a question, or asking my brother who maybe took this class already. Maybe that means I'm going to call my auntie and say, hey, auntie, what do you know about? Maybe it means I'm going to get up on YouTube. So I'm going to try to get help from more than one place. Getting help. I'm just putting that on there because remember, a thinking map, we can abbreviate. All right, so maybe another thing about being resourceful would be knowing where to look, right? So someone who's resourceful knows what is available. All right, what is there? I'm going to put there because it's shorter than available and I don't want to make you wait. Okay, so what is there? So these are examples of what resourceful is, and now I got kind of a good idea of resourceful. I think, you know, resourceful might mean when I'm at home and my internet goes out and I've got an assignment due the next day. And I remember I have data on my phone and I use that instead. So I use my phone to get the assignment done instead of my computer. That would be an example of being resourceful. So maybe we could summarize that by saying, how would we summarize that? So maybe we could summarize that by saying finding alternatives, right? Because if my internet goes down on my computer and I realize I can use my phone, that's an alternative, right? That's looking for another way to do it. There we go. Okay, so now I've thought about what resourceful means, and I've kind of thought of some personal examples as I was doing that. And I didn't write the whole example out because a thinking map, especially a circle map, it's not meant to be a huge assignment where we write pages and pages. A circle map is sort of a focused brainstorm where we are just trying to get down everything we know about that specific word or idea. All right, so I've got what I needed down here. Next, I'm going to circle this. And where could I have looked to get more information about what it means to be resourceful? Well, let's think about this resourcefully. I could ask my teacher. I could talk to friends. I could Google it. I could look for videos. So there are lots of different places we can go to help us define these terms. Maybe I'm really old school and I have a printed dictionary and I wanted to look at the definition of that word. That'd be a great way to build some background and give me some context for what this word means, which is what we're doing when we use a circle map to define in context. All right, so remember, we've now given it a definition. I just said circle maps are for what? Defining in context. Yes, so I need my frame of reference because that is my context. So I'm going to draw my frame of reference. There we go. Okay, now in my frame of reference, I'm going to be talking about what exactly, how I got this information. Okay, so some of this information I got because I thought about what some of my excellent students do. So in this case, I'm going to put that. Saw students, that's how I abbreviate students, doing. Okay, now I've also read the definition before, so I'm going to put dictionary. Now I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me. For this particular map, when you're talking about your aspect of grad and the one that you're defining, I want you to think in your frame of reference of an example of how this particular word, this term, in my case, resourceful, how does it apply to me? Can I think of an example from my life or someone that I have seen? And I want you to do one or two sentences. Just tell me about an example from your life, you or someone you know that was resourceful. So I talked about the student, oops, didn't mean to write that. There we go. Redo. There we go. So I talked about a couple of examples, and I put here, saw students doing. So one example of a student who was resourceful was a student who got stuck on a math problem, and before they even texted me, the student actually went on YouTube and they looked up a video on how to solve the problem. Now, they watched the video and they were still not sure. That's when the student texted me, and they texted me a picture of the math problem so that I could then help them solve the problem. So that's being resourceful, because they started with the textbook, then they went to a video, then they asked someone else for help. That's an example of being resourceful. So I'm going to put on here, student read book, comma, there we go, watched video. Sorry guys, we're glitching a little over here on the edge. Watched video, and texted teacher for help. Now that's being resourceful, right? Because they thought of all the resources they had available to them when they got stuck. Excellent. So this is an example of what you're going to do on your maps this week. You get to choose which word from grads you want to do. You'll have to do some work to define it. You can Google it, you can look it up in the dictionary, talk to friends, look and see if there's an example of that word in something you're studying for your teacher this week. Talk to your teacher about it. In your next meeting, your teacher is going to ask you for your grad's circle map. Also, you will be asked to show one additional circle map that is defining one of your vocabulary words from your assignments in context this week. So you have two assignments. The first one is a grad's circle map, and the second one is to choose a vocabulary from your work this week. It can be an assigned vocabulary word, or if you choose, there might be another word that you're interested in learning more about. You're going to take one of those words from what you're studying this week, and you're going to create a circle map to define it in context. Please remember that you need to include a frame of reference that tells where you got your information from and hooks it to something you already know, some prior knowledge you have. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for the Thinking Maps Ambassadors class. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week.